Today I will be teaching you how to install a third-party headlight to your Blue Spark ANCHEER bike connected directly to the battery. The tools you will need for this are the tool bag which came with your bike, which includes a Phillips-head screwdriver and multiple Allen wrenches. A magnet dish so that you don't lose the screws. The keys to your bike, specifically the bike battery, and a multimeter. If you don't have one, you can get really good ones for less than $30 at your local hardware store. This is necessary in order to ensure safety. You will also need at least 2 staples. You can extract staples on their own by pushing down on a stapler without any paper in it, as well as electric tape. If you don't have any electric tape, you can get really cheap and good electric tape if you look for PVC. That is my personal recommendation. All that matters is that it's electric tape. Step 1. Unlock and remove your battery. And since you can plug it in separately while you're working, you might as well do that. Step 2. Take the appropriately sized Allen wrench and your Phillips-head screwdriver and remove all of these screws. This is one piece of plastic that's all put together, so you have to remove all of them. And I recommend that you keep a magnetic dish handy, because you will not only have to keep track of a lot of screws, but a lot of washers, which are very important to prolonging the durability. Once you have removed all 6 screws and all 3 washers, you can lift the piece of plastic up and off to reveal the combination harness and junction box. The junction box is one slim, tight piece of metal with barely any room inside. However, you could still fit just the right amount of circuitry in there if you try. You should also keep track of these PVC spacers, as they will make it easier to put the harness back together. Step 4. In the case of the headlight, which is linked in the description, you will see 2 wires of major importance. There will be a switch, and there will be the headlight itself. And they will each have a set containing 1 pair of wires and 1 single wire. Each single wire represents a power supply. And in this case, black means negative and yellow means positive. This is easy to remember because in the case of this bicycle, the black lead is the same polarity. Make sure that the metal inside the pins is touching the other side of the metal of the harness. You may have to bend the pins in order to make contact, but that's okay because you can always bend it back later. What's important is that you make firm contact with the pins so that power can transfer from the battery here to the pins here. This step is very important to follow, as it will inform whether or not you should skip the next step. Set your multimeter to DC voltage and probe between the 1st from the left and 4th from the left pins. You should read a voltage. If you do not read a voltage, that's a serious problem. Now test between the 2nd and 4th pins. You should read no voltage. Now test between the 1st and 3rd pins. You should read no voltage. Now test between pins 2 and 3. You should read no voltage. If you read a voltage during any of the steps that wasn't prodding from pin 1 to 4, then you should skip the next step. Otherwise, this is an indication that pins 2 and 3 are dead and will need to be bridged. We will bridge them by connecting pins 1 and 2 together and pins 3 and 4 together. This is safe to do because, as indicated here, the pairs are of the same electrode. The only other possibility would be pairing opposite electrodes, which would turn anything into a fuse. We will not be doing that, to make sure that you are bridging only the same polarity. Step 6. Bridging the electrodes. Keep in mind we will be doing this on the harness instead of the battery to improve safety. Bend the staple into this shape. You want to have right angles that squeeze into each other to maximize the surface area that they come into contact with. It should create a point which allows it to go downwards like that. Keep in mind that this part of the harness can be pulled back and off. So for each pair of electrodes, you should tuck the point behind it so that it doesn't come loose. I recommend using electric tape to adhere the pins between, with the sticky side facing the plastic of the harness and the not sticky side facing the aluminum. Remember, only bridge the pairs 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Do not bridge 2 and 3. That will create a short. You want to squeeze the staple slightly smaller than the space between the two prongs so that it squeezes it on the way down. And keep in mind the right angle, as it being parallel to the prong means that it will contact as much of it as possible. With the pointed side being tucked behind the prongs and insulated with electric tape, you will now take out your multimeter for the next step. As a continuation of step 6, we will be testing for continuity. You can do this by setting your digital multimeter to its lowest resistance setting, marked with an ohm. When there isn't any continuity, it should display a negative result like this. But when you touch it between something that's metal and conductive, you should receive a number, and a number that's very low. This is how we will be able to tell if there's a conductive path between the electrodes. Test between the 1st and 4th pin. You should receive a negative result, otherwise there's a serious problem. Test between pins 2 and 3. You should receive a negative result, otherwise you've done something wrong during the staples portion, and you should correct that. Now for the positive testing. Test between the 1st and 2nd pins. If you've done it correctly, you should receive a very low result, showing that there is a good conductive path for the headlight to work with. If it's a slightly big number, like 100, that isn't bad, but it's suboptimal because that's power lost. However, if you receive a negative result and you're sure that the staple is placed and that the electrodes are correctly touching, then you should adjust the staple, as it may have a bad contact. This is the same for touching pins 3 and 4. Step 7. Contain your cables. Once you are sure that there is a correct path of continuity here, then you will want to bring the cables in from the switch and the supply so that the switch meets here, and I will address that soon. But first, what you need to do is remove these 2 screws and this metal bracket. Then find a space in between the wires to fit in the supply and switch wire. Then you will need to push down on this screw while turning it right in order to screw it in, and you'll need to apply extra pressure onto the other screw. You'll have to create a pressurized environment using the screws because this is a very slim and tight construction, but it's okay. This won't damage anything as long as you fit things neatly. As for the switch, there's an empty spot in between a large capacitor and some smaller capacitors right up against the body where you can fit the switch junction. I recommend that you cover the switch junction with electric tape and stick the electric tape onto the capacitor so that it stays firmly in place. It's a large capacitor, so there will be plenty of room for it to stick. This will give it the best chance of fitting. Keep in mind that you have a very small amount of space to work with. Step 8. Reinsert the plastic section, making sure that the plastic of the harness goes behind the pins of the junction box. And if you'll see here, the pointy parts of your staples should be going in between the two plastics so that it is isolated and so that it is resistive to being jostled apart. Now, make sure that you carefully line up the screw holes and then apply pressure as you screw. Although you should do as good job making everything fit as possible, you might still have to create a pressured environment. This is okay though, because the plastic is very electrically insulative, meaning that no matter how much it gets squeezed, everything will be electrically safe. Plus, when you tighten things more tightly, it makes them more resistant to shock. So that's kind of a bonus. Just keep that in mind while you're screwing to apply a bit of extra pressure. Remember to do the 3 Phillips-head screws first. And before you start screwing these, you should short between all of these pins using the screwdriver, remembering to only hold the plastic part. This will short out all the pins. You are doing this because on the chance that there's a capacitor charged in here, you don't want it to shock you while you're screwing in this screw. But if you short it out beforehand, there won't be any energy left to shock you, so you can screw safely. Once all the screws are screwed in halfway, you should take out your multimeter and test between pins 1 and 2 and pins 3 and 4. You should get a positive result from each. If you don't, then you should check your staple job. Remembering to put in your PVC spacers beforehand, screw everything down nice and tight. Remember to screw them down tightly because in the next step we will be placing the battery on, and the battery requires a slim space to slide down. Step 9. Get your battery and place it against your harness. Look underneath the battery to make sure that it is lining up with the harness. Then push it down to ensure contact. To make absolutely certain that the contact is firm, make sure that your bike is locked. By locking it, you will ensure that your battery is firmly in place. Then confirm the connection by checking to see if the headlight is on. If the headlight isn't on, make sure that the headlight switch is on. If the headlight switch is on but the light still isn't on, then check the switch connections inside of the junction box. If those don't work, then just check your staple job. As you can see, with everything assembled into one neat package, we now have a bright headlight. In the next step, we will mount it. Step 10. To affix the headlight to the front of your bike, you'll need a screw, a washer, a nut, and an optional acorn nut. You can get these from your local bike store or at a hardware store, such as Home Depot or Lowe's. Mine has a tool at the end so that I can use the same anchor wrench that's included with the bike. Another optional but recommended addition is thread lock. The Blue Spark doesn't have threads at the front, so you'll need to get an appropriately sized nut for the back of the bolt. Recommended but not required is an acorn nut so that the back isn't as sharp and exposed. Step 11. Get a bunch of zip ties and make the cables neater. Connect the first cable to a cable that's already inside of the bike as an objective reference. Then use multiple other zip ties on the way down. Make it look neat and make sure everything is tied down nice and tight, as the electric insulation will help improve performance. Step 12. Mount and test the controls. These are the controls that come with the headlight that I ordered. And you can mount it however you wish. Here I will test the control for the headlight. Now I will test the horn. Make sure to test your controls so that you can make them how you like and to make sure that you have a reliable operation. Once that's done, look over your bike, check all your connections, and you should have a freshly installed, much more powerful headlight that uses the same battery as the one you already have and that you can recharge easily. Once you're done probing, make sure that you turn your multimeter off to save the battery. I hope that this guide helped you.